Hello and welcome. Thank you for joining us today for this webinar, MTSS Solutions for International Schools. It is a Lindamood-Bell for Schools webinar, and we're going to do a bit of a Lindamood-Bell overview. My name is Brilliana Rollins, and I'm the manager of international endeavors for schools, which means I get to collaborate with schools and school organizations around the globe on a daily basis. So as we look into multi-tiered systems of support for international schools and international organizations, let's first take a quick note from our co-founder, Nancy Bell, and the author of many of the programs you are going to hear about today. At Lindamood-Bell, we believe passionately that all students in schools can be taught to read and comprehend to their potential. It is a core belief of the company that all students can learn to read to their potential. And our research continues to verify that sensory cognitive functions, and we are going to be talking about these in depth during our time today, these are a critical factor for successful school achievement. Let's go ahead and take a look at our agenda for our time together. First, we are going to look at what is the primary cause of reading success or failure. What is that underlying issue that is keeping students from learning to their potential? Then we're going to look at Lindamood-Bell's process-based approach to learning and education. We're going to talk about some of the instructional programs we use. And then we're going to shift our focus towards a few case studies here in the Americas. And I know I have people joining me from all over the Americas and perhaps from all over the world. So thank you. Welcome. We're going to look at a few professional development models that are sustaining and increasing student achievement. So two specific case studies, one from the beautiful island nation of Jamaica. I know many are watching from there. Hello, my friends. And then another from an international school in Honduras. And again, I know many are joining from there. Hello. And then lastly, we will have time for a question and answer. So for over 30 years, we're up to 35 years with Lindamood-Bell. Students of all ages and backgrounds have come to Lindamood-Bell, either our learning centers or have received Lindamood-Bell instruction in a school setting because they are experiencing failure and frustration in school. And the question that has been driving this company forward for 35 years, the question was and is, why do some students succeed and others do not? So here are some essential questions we are going to be looking at and that have been driving our instruction and research here at Lindamood-Bell. Again, what is that primary cause of weak language and literacy skills? And once we have identified that primary cause, what is the correct instructional solution to remediate and develop those weak skills? And then, can that instructional solution be delivered and sustained in a professional development model? How can we teach educators in international schools and around the globe to use this instructional solution with their own students? So let's tackle these one question at a time. That first question, what was the primary cause? It certainly created other questions. Why can some children easily learn to read and others cannot? Why do some children decode below their potential, unable to catch up, even after years of special education, reading programs, and or private tutoring? And I myself have met hundreds of students with this profile, and I'm sure you have as well. Why is that? Why are some students what would be called analytical readers? Students who are continually cycling through all of those phonics rules to sound out words, even if they've seen those words multiple times. instead of becoming global readers. A global reader primarily reads from a place of word recognition and vocabulary and context, with word attack as a backup plan. And some of these students are analytical readers even after completing many years of phonological instruction. And why is that? Why do some students, even with multiple exposures, struggle to memorize sight words? And one day they know the word why is why, and the next day they're sounding it out as wuye. And then for some students, why can they read with ease, fluency, intonation, and yet they don't comprehend what they read and hear? As always, these questions are driving the work that we do. So let's identify what was the primary cause. What is the primary cause? Let's first start off by clearing up some myths, because the primary cause of weak language and literacy skills is not IQ. It's not for a lack of trying, and it is not for a lack of life experience, as I have heard many times over my years in education. The primary cause is at the sensory level. The brain can only process sensory information. So we take information in through our senses. And some of your students, and so maybe perhaps some of your family members, have strengths in sensory processing, and some do not. This is that primary cause. Your students may have weakness in sensory cognitive functions, the ability to process the information coming in through their senses. Let's look at 3 sensory cognitive functions that underlie being a global reader. The first, I'm sure you recognize, phoneme awareness. Phoneme awareness is your ability to know how many sounds there are in a word. You can identify specific sounds, and you can even sequence or manipulate. I find it helpful to use a keyword when we're talking about these 3 sensory cognitive functions. So if I wanted, we're going to use the word cat. So if I wanted to access your phoneme awareness, I would say, how many sounds are there in cat? 3. Great. What is the second sound? Ah. What's the last sound? T. Great. Make it a p. Now we have cap. That's accessing your phoneme awareness. Certainly some students have a strength in this and others have a weakness. A new sensory cognitive function for you may be symbol imagery. Symbol imagery takes it a step further. For not only can you create mental imagery for the sounds or phonemes in words, you also can picture the letter sequence in words, the graphemes. So symbol imagery is that all-important phoneme and grapheme connection essential for quality orthographic mapping for word attack and word recognition skills leading to fluency. If I wanted to access your symbol imagery, I would now ask, what letter do you see first? What letter do we need to know is first in cat? And of course, it's C. Why is it the letter C? Why isn't it a K? And the real answer is because it is, because we have that orthographic map that cat begins with the letter C. Right? Symbol imagery is even more important in English than in many other languages. Many other languages are far more phonetic than English is. If you take Spanish as an example, if you say O in Spanish, guess what letter you need to picture? Yeah, the letter O. Always, every day. It's very handy. If you say O in English, there are many different letter combinations that you could picture for that sound. Back to our keyword of cat, right? When you meet a Kathy or a Kate or my colleague Erica, you don't know whether it's a C or a K until you ask them. And I've met Ericas that have a CK. So being able to picture the right graphemes in for the right sounds in specific words is essential for reading in English. The third and distinct sensory cognitive function is concept imagery. This is someone's ability to create an image gestalt or whole for what they read and hear. This is someone's ability to create a mental movie for the language that they either read or hear. If I wanted to access your concept imagery, I would tell you all to picture a cat. And don't just picture it, in space. Give it a color, picture it doing something. That ability to take language in and turn it into a mental movie, as you'll see, has everything to do with comprehension. So now that we've identified these three sensory cognitive functions, let's talk about how they underlie the essential component skills or parts of reading. Everyone needs to have some amount of word attack. This is your ability to figure out new words that you've never seen before. My first name is an excellent example as when you may need to use your word attack, because I have yet to meet another Brilliana. Both your phonemic awareness and your symbol imagery are going to help with your word attack skills. This is where sound symbol and all of your phonics rules live. Of course, we don't want to read from a place of word attack. That's analytical, and we want to be global readers. Therefore, we need very, very strong word recognition skills. This is where that orthographic processing is going to come in, and symbol imagery is the underlying sensory cognitive function that's going to allow us to recognize words both like cat and words like laugh. So we don't have to sound them out every time we see them. We also need vocabulary skills if we're going to comprehend what we read and use context where appropriate. This is where your concept imagery, that ability to picture a cat, as well as your symbol imagery, plays a role in this language circle. Perhaps for many of your students who English is an additional language for them, this might be one of the component skills in reading, especially in English, that may be a struggle for them. And so they're having to try and compensate with their word attack and word recognition. So all of these different skills are essential to reading accurately and fluently enough in order to comprehend what we read, which is the whole goal of reading, is to comprehend and gain knowledge. And for this, you also need that concept imagery, that ability to turn what you're reading on the page into a mental movie in order to store it and understand it. Certainly, as I'm talking, you might be thinking and imagining, oh, my students have strong word attack, but weak vocabulary. Those are important conversations to be having as we differentiate instruction. So just to refresh, okay, imagery is a primary sensory cognitive function, but there isn't just one type of imagery, right? We have imagery for sounds and letters, and we have imagery for the whole, for those mental movies. And we need both in order to be accessing classroom curriculum. But as I already mentioned, some students have a strength in one and a weakness in the other. So what you can end up with are students in your classroom or in your learning support groups that might have very different reasons for being there. And it's important to identify those. You might have students with weak decoding, where their phonemic awareness and symbol imagery are their primary weaknesses. Their comprehension might be just fine. If it is weak enough, they may be labeled with the term dyslexia. This profile of student is often one that educators are more familiar with, right? Belabored decoding, struggling to identify words and recognize them, struggling to spell with orthographic perfection. Often they might spell something phonetically. So that profile, I know many educators are more familiar with. So we're going to take a little bit of a deeper dive on the right side of this language processing spectrum, where students have a weak comprehension, where their concept imagery is their primary cause for reading struggle. If they are struggling, if the weakness is big enough, they may be labeled as having hyperlexia or may even be diagnosed on the autism spectrum. We're going to dive a little deeper into this profile, but just on this slide, let's all take a notice that the student on the left and the student on the right, if we were looking to create differentiated homogeneous groups, they do not belong in the same intervention group. Right? They have very different needs. One student needs to focus on comprehension and the other needs to focus on decoding. I know often schedules, right, make us have these students in the same group, but we definitely need to fight hard to have these students in separate groups so they receive the correct differentiated instruction to develop their weakness. So again, the student on the right, for many of these students, language can appear to go in one ear and then just right out the other. They may be able to hold on to random little facts or details, but they miss the big picture. And I know you've seen these students. They read fluently, and then you ask them, what did you read? And it's that blank face of fear. Imagery, concept imagery, is going to be what helps prevent language from going in one ear and out the other for these students. And that way, once they have that strong mental movie, that imaged whole, then they can do all of the things we want them to do. All those higher order thinking skills like quality and succinct main ideas, accurate conclusions. They can infer with evidence-based text, and they can predict and extend based on what they have learned instead of some random anecdote that they have from their childhood. And they can evaluate what they read and compare it with other information that they've read. But they can't do any of this without that strong concept imagery, that gestalt. If this is a weakness for some of your students, there are symptoms. We've already talked about the comprehension and the problem solving. We often, at a very early age, we see multi-step directions be a problem. They may not express themselves clearly, either while speaking or in writing. I've seen many students who just stare blankly at the page because if you don't picture anything, you can imagine that there's really nothing to write about. Grasping humor is one you can also see at a very young age. People often say that you'll know you're fluent in a language when you understand the humor of that language. So much humor is language-based. And it's a play on words. So you can imagine weak concept imagery affects that. They might also struggle, I see the other ones here, cause and effect, mental mapping, and just in general, responding to a world that is full of language. So that's the primary cause, right? Weaknesses in those sensory cognitive functions, phonemic awareness, symbol imagery, that one all important for orthographic mapping, and concept imagery, essential for comprehension and critical thinking. So then if we now shift to what the instructional solution needs to be, it needs to be a process-based approach that develops those sensory cognitive functions. You need instruction that will develop concept imagery. It's exactly what we have here. We need to be able to identify and develop those underlying sensory cognitive processes. We need to help students bring this to a conscious level. Many students do not know that they should be picturing as they listen to lecture or read in their novel. They may not know that it will help them to picture the sequence of letters in laugh when they have to read that word or spell that word at a later date. We need to bring that to a conscious level for them. We need process-based education differentiates right? Not all students need the same instructional approach because not all students have the same weakness. And this is, of course, what needs to happen across an MTSS framework. We need to identify where their struggle is and differentiate our response to that struggle so that they can apply these sensory cognitive functions to all learning and literacy skills. And very importantly, process-based education does not focus on content first. We can't just repeat the same lesson from the classroom in a small group session. If we just keep repeating the content, we're never getting at the primary cause of the struggle to begin with. And what process-based education do is it can close that achievement gap. We hear a lot about closing the achievement gap, but that's really what process-based education can do. The achievement gap is such. You have this beautiful line. Students come in kindergarten in a US-based school model, and they leave in 12th grade, and every year they make 1 year of gain. It's lovely. Of course, we know that not all students follow that trajectory. Even before kindergarten, we might see a small gap between where we want them to be and where they are functioning. And over the years, this gap can increase. Direct instruction often ends, literacy instruction often ends in around 3rd grade, and we can see that gap continue to widen. What process-based education does is it meets the students where they are and slowly works to build their processing so that eventually they will be able to access that core curriculum. So again, we need instruction that focuses on developing these sensory cognitive functions, phonemic awareness, symbol imagery, and concept imagery. As we move on to the case studies, I want to take a moment to talk about the programs that you are going to see mentioned. All of these are programs that Lindamood-Bell provides professional development in. So and they're all process-based. Seeing Stars is a program that explicitly and systematically develops both symbol imagery and phonemic awareness as the basis for word attack, word recognition, and fluency. This is the primary program that is used to teach students to read to their potential. Visualizing and verbalizing is a process-based approach and program that explicitly and systematically develops concept imagery, that ability to picture the cat, and obviously much larger pieces of information, paragraphs, be able to picture paragraphs at a time. And this is the basis for comprehension and critical thinking, higher order thinking. The other program you will hear mentioned is a program called Talkies. Talkies also explicitly and systematically develops concept imagery, but this is specifically for the basis of verbal expression and vocabulary development. So you can imagine we are building vocabulary and verbal expression at a much smaller scale than visualizing and verbalizing. I always say that I desperately need Talkies in Spanish, which is the closest thing I can say is an additional language for me. But I certainly need work with my vocabulary and my ability to put more than 2 or 3 on my best day Spanish words together. Now that you have heard about the programs, let's talk quickly through Lindamood-Bell's RTI or MTSS model. You'll see it in these various tiers. I hope I am not the first person to tell you that the most important tier in this system is this first tier, this core instruction. The more that you have quality process-based education in your tier 1, so your whole classroom instruction, the fewer learning support referrals you're going to have. So here's what we recommend. In primary and early primary, 15, maybe 20 minutes of direct seeing stars instruction daily, and visualizing and verbalizing that same sort of 15, maybe 20 minutes. This would be supplemental and in addition to whatever curriculum you are also following. So this specifically is going to develop those phonemic awareness, symbol imagery, and concept imagery. And then, of course, you can apply VV, visualizing and verbalizing techniques, across all your classroom content using quality Socratic questioning. If we're looking at students who have been identified as needing additional support than what's available at the core instruction, we're going to move on and look at some targeted group intervention. This is for students who perhaps are between the 25th and 36th percentile on whatever standardized assessments or progress monitoring tools you're using. They may be up to a year behind instructionally. And in terms of recommendations, we're going to look at maybe 30, 45 minutes of instruction a couple times a week with groups of 8 or fewer students. This instruction may be happening in the classroom, or it may be happening in a different instructional setting. And then we have our intensive group. These are really the students that have been identified as needing intensive, repetitive remediation in order to develop those sensory cognitive functions. Often these are students below the 25th percentile on your assessments. They may be 2 or more years behind instructionally to their peers. Importantly, they need to get upwards of over 100 hours of its small group differentiated instruction in order to see an impact on their achievement. So we would recommend 60 or more minutes of daily instruction in groups of 5 or less, homogeneous groups. So you're either going to have a student that may be in Seeing Stars or a student in using the visualizing and verbalizing program. So that is our RTI model. Now let's see how a few organizations have taken that RTI model and the levels of professional learning that we offer to increase student achievement in their instructional setting. First, we're going to take a look at an international school and how they have implemented Lindamood-Bell instruction across their MTSS framework. So not just in their targeted intervention groups or their intensive intervention groups, but very importantly in that core instruction as well. So I apologize, I'm going to butcher this name. I typically call the school EIS, but Escuela Internacional Sampedrana is in San Pedro, Sula, Honduras. I've had the pleasure of going there many times. It is a lovely international school. So it is an international school implementing US curriculum. In fact, you can see me, I'm right here. This photo was taken a few years ago. These are many of the educators that work in the learning support centers that they have both at EIS and their sister campus, EILL, in La Lima, Honduras. The partnership with Lindamood-Bell began in 2010. Approximately 90% of students speak a language other than English at home. The school has from an early childhood center all the way up through a US-based high school, so about 3 years old to 18 years old. And like I said, the schools have implemented Lindamood-Bell instruction across all tiers of their RTI model. So both as a prevention and intervention. And over the years, this has resulted in far fewer learning support referrals. Let's take a look at their implementation. I know this is a busy slide, but I'm going to walk you through it. So here we have Early Childhood Center, or the ECC, their elementary school, And then also in the secondary, both middle and high school, because again, they follow US curriculum. So in this all important tier 1, with their little people, with their toddlers, their little 3-year-olds, they're using that Talkies program in Spanish to develop their vocabulary and verbal expression in their primary language. About 10 minutes a day, and this is often in centers. So the library center, the math center, the science center. In pre-K and kindergarten, this is where EIS curriculum transitions from Spanish to English, now all English instruction. And so they transition to using Talkies in English to develop that vocabulary and verbal expression in this additional language for the vast majority of this student population. They also introduce Seeing Stars to help build that phonemic and that phoneme grapheme connection. About 15 minutes a day. In the elementary school, they're doing 15 minutes daily of both Seeing Stars and visualizing and verbalizing. This is done whole class. So you can picture 25 students in front of the educator, and they are doing this instruction. And then at grades 3 and 4, they are using those visualizing and verbalizing techniques and applying it to their content. Same thing at the secondary level. Many of the educators have received professional learning in visualizing and verbalizing, and they are incorporating it into their history lessons, into their poetry lessons, etc. If we look down here at the tier 2 and 3 level, the ECC at the Early Childhood Center, in small groups or one-on-one, depending on the student's needs, they're being seen upwards of 20, maybe 30 minutes, a number of times a week, and they are receiving either Talkies or Seeing Stars in either English or Spanish when it comes to Talkies. Again, differentiated to what has been identified as that student's weakness. And then students are grouped accordingly to that differentiated weakness so that we can develop the weakness, right? Over in the elementary school, we have tier 2 being seen a number of days a week for about 20 minutes at a time. These groups are often being done in the classroom, either by learning support staff or the classroom teacher. And then at tier 3, so that intensive, they are in small groups for 50 minutes, 4 to 5 days a week. And this instruction is being done at the Student Success Center, where that learning support staff is differentiating the instruction with either Seeing Stars or VV. And then at the secondary level, they do have some students who are still many years behind. And so those students are receiving 5 days a week, 50 minutes every day in either Seeing Stars to develop their decoding or in visualizing and verbalizing to develop their comprehension and critical thinking. So as you can imagine, there are a lot of educators at EIS and EILL who are implementing this process-based approach, from the early years teachers all the way up to high school educators. So what sort of professional learning is needed to impact student achievement and make this a sustaining model? For many of you that work in international schools, you know that there is high turnover built in to the staffing there. Every 2 or 3 years, new first grade and second grade teachers arrive and need to be able to implement this tier 1 process-based instruction, just like it has been going for years. So what's the professional learning model need to look like in order to sustain this process-based instruction across this framework? What we have here is the Lindamood-Bell levels of professional learning. Just like our students who need systems of support, it's essential for high quality professional learning that we have systems of ongoing support for our educators, right? Everyone knows that a high quality PD is not what's called a one and done. It can't be a one-day workshop and then you're on your own. So what the Lindamood-Bell levels do is they follow universally accepted best practice, where the learning needs to be ongoing. It needs to be collaborative. There need to be opportunities for both synchronous and asynchronous learning. There needs to be opportunity for mentoring, coaching, feedback. And that's what we have here. Everyone that participates in our professional learning, the very first step are these initial introductory, live, highly interactive workshops to teach scene stars or visualizing and verbalizing or talkies. We know that that's enough. That's why we include a year-long review that can be accessed. So you can watch review videos of the different programs. In addition to just reviewing, teachers need to be able to refine their skills and program implementation with error handling, lesson planning, etc. That's where level 2 comes in. Level 2 is on-demand refinement learning. There are asynchronous courses on error handling and bringing that imagery to a conscious level. You also get access to our online learning community, right? This is where there are monthly PLCs in Scene Stars or VV, as well as forums where you can access Lindamood-Bell instructional experts. Every teacher at EIS, at the bare minimum, had access to level 1 and level 2 learning. But EIS knew that they needed more than that. They needed to maximize their investment by bringing the professional learning right into the classroom. And that's where level 3 and level 4 come in. Level 3 gives educators access to live coaching that moves through a cycle of modeling, co-teaching, and then observation with feedback. They have access to additional instructional planning on-demand courses through our online learning platform. And now they have monthly PLCs that are targeted directly and in response to what we're seeing in the live coaching. Many of the educators at EIS, whether they were classroom teachers or learning support teachers, had Lindamood-Bell instructional experts right by their side as they started to implement the program so that they could increase their instructional capacity and efficacy. In addition, like I mentioned, there is a high turnover rate in international schools. So what they also needed was to develop a systemic model that could be sustained. And in order to do that, they needed to identify instructional leaders that were local and going to stay so that they could carry on the instructional feedback and mentoring as the years went on. So these instructional leaders were given additional level 4 instructional professional development. They were introduced to assessment orientations so that they were able to assess students to identify their strengths and weaknesses, symbol imagery or concept imagery. They were given additional instructional development and development on how to coach and mentor others, even more advanced instructional planning. And this also, level 4 also includes things like community events, leadership events, and really, like it says, is a full systemic model across an MTSS framework. Again, that professional learning needs to be ongoing. Right? It needs to be collaborative, and it needs to be both synchronous and asynchronous. And that is reflected with these levels of learning to create a sustainable model of process-based instruction. So let's see what impact all of this professional learning has had on students. So from 2010 to 2019, 390 students received Scene Stars instruction at the tier 2. These are really tier 2 or tier 3 students. On average, about 30 minutes 4 times a week. Some received more, some received less. You can see the measures for word attack, reading and spelling, fluency and comprehension. And of course, you can see the effect, right? All measures large standard score changes on average for all 390 students over a near 10-year period when it came to increasing their fluency and decoding ability. In comprehension, you see something very similar. 200 students received visualizing and verbalizing instruction, same average instructional time, using some comprehension, oral language, and vocabulary assessments. And once again, you see on average, all 200 of those students made large standard score changes. This is affecting their ability to access curriculum. These are students who perhaps were receiving learning support and then didn't need it anymore and have gone on to be independent in their instruction. I am certainly very proud to have played a role that I have played in this partnership with EIS. Here is a quick quote from the former superintendent of EIS and the gentleman who helped bring Lindamood-Bell to Honduras, Ron Ver. He says, "There are 1,000,001 different programs that will claim whatever they want to claim, but there are very few of them that are actually supported by the Department of Education." So we used, again, data to identify what we need and where we need to go. We also use data to identify which programs work and don't work. Lindamood-Bell came out from that search. That quote is from a video that was made about the partnership between EIS and Lindamood-Bell a number of years ago. My colleague, Erica, who's in the background, is going to put that in the chat for all of you. So in case you want to watch the full video, you can do that at a later moment. Additionally, I recently interviewed one of those instructional leaders, core in this sustained 10-year model. I interviewed her for a web series called Global Perspectives that we have here at Lindamood-Bell for Schools. And Erica is also going to put that in the chat. So in case you want to hear more about the partnership directly from one of the instructional leaders there. Thank you, Erica. So now moving away from Honduras and across the Caribbean Sea to the beautiful island nation of Jamaica. I know many people are joining us from Jamaica, and I'm so pleased to have you. Hello. This is a different case study. So instead of a closed system like EIS, the international school, now we're really looking, the organization is looking to have a nationwide impact on literacy achievement. So creative language-based learning is the organization with many sponsoring partners who is working on this initiative to impact student achievement, just like the students you see pictured here. Here are some project details. This initiative is endorsed by the Ministry of Education and the Early Childhood Commission. It has received funding from the World Bank and other international development banks. The partnership with Lindamood-Bell started in 2016, and Chase Fund and Sandals Foundation, amongst many others, are major sponsors of this initiative. And this allows educators like the one you see pictured here to receive this professional development at no cost to themselves. So the stated goal of creative language-based learning is to provide professional development to develop an island-wide network of early childhood and special needs teachers who are able to meet the needs of students with language-based learning. So for these educators, every single one of them needs to be that instructional leader with access to level 4 learning, so they can be the instructional leader in their own school or instructional setting. So let's take a look at the ongoing cycles of support that these educators receive. Successful applicants, So my understanding is that there is a very rigorous application and interview process. In that very first year that they're part of the project, they receive all levels, those initial workshops in the spring, those on-demand refinement courses. They get coaching in their own school and participate in PLC meetings. They also receive that same level 4 learning with assessment orientation and differentiated grouping. Then that summer, they receive additional live coaching. This was traditionally done in person, though I will tell you last year it was done all online, as they are the teachers in a 4+ hours daily summer learning camp for students in Jamaica. They participate in additional PLC meetings and additional professional learning on data-driven grouping and lesson planning. So they get this instruction in their own school, and then again in an intensive way at this summer learning camp. And then in year 2 and beyond, they continue that support, ongoing PLC meetings and additional on-demand refinement courses to increase their instructional capacity in seeing stars and visualizing and verbalizing. They get an opportunity to teach in the additional summer learning camps and receive more coaching to further increase that capacity. To date, over 200 educators nationwide have received this ongoing professional development. In 2020, all that professional development was delivered virtually. I'm thankful that I have been able to present a number of these level 1 workshops, both in Kingston and also last year, 60 successful applicants and I all joined on Zoom for those level 1 initial workshops. And it was a wonderful experience. And this all led to Jamaica's very first online summer learning camp last year. Quite the feat. So all of this support, how you can see again, this professional model, they're receiving all levels. All of these applicants are being identified and developed as instructional leaders all across the nation. In 2018, 32 students participated in that summer learning camp and had complete pre and post tests, roughly 47 hours of instruction. And you can see what we often see is that these initial component skills of word attack and word recognition and vocabulary, those inner circles, those often develop first. And then they work to incorporate those to further increase that fluency. Nice to see that comprehension gain, though. That's nice. And then last year in the virtual summer school, I know more students participated in this, but only 17 had complete pre and post assessments. I know that there was a lot of connectivity issues, but they persevered and had 17 students that were able to go all the way through the intensive summer school. And once again, you saw good gains in those component skills and even some gains in accuracy and a nice medium change in fluency. I know Lindamood-Bell is very proud to be a part of this initiative in Jamaica, and we look forward to many more years working with creative language-based learning and all of the sponsors. Here are a few quotes from Jamaica. Anseline Cunningham is a principal, and she's also a multi-year project participant. And she says, "It would be my greatest joy to see every school in Jamaica with a teacher trained in this program. If we are going to see a change in our literacy level in Jamaica and even our numeracy, and see Jamaica being the place to be for your educational needs, it's needed." If you want to hear more from Anseline, there is a video that Erica is going to put in the chat, which is a longer interview with Anseline and impact that all of this professional learning has had on her instruction. And then from Mandy Melville, the founder and really the driving force behind this amazing initiative in Jamaica, the founder of creative language-based learning, what she says is, it's really a country we're trying to change. If you want to learn more about the project as a whole, Erica is going to put one more link in that chat for you. And it's a short video that gives an overview of the project and interviews many more people than just Anne-Celine. So to sum up, the goal of process-based education and the goal of both of these initiatives is to get students to a place of independence. In order to do that, they need to be able to self-correct and monitor their own sensory processing. And in order to be able to monitor it, we need to bring that sensory information to a conscious level. We need to develop their phonemic awareness, symbol imagery, and concept imagery. And we need professional learning to support and increase the instructional capacity of these educators to do this process-based education. All right, that was quite a bit, I know. Hopefully, Erica, we got some good questions. We have about almost 10 minutes where we can answer some of these questions. So they've heard a lot about you, Erica, so go ahead and unmute and show, and what have we gotten?
Well, so our first question is, for the majority of my students, English is an additional language. What role does limited English vocabulary play in comprehension?
Oh, it's an excellent question. Certainly, vocabulary is necessary, but not sufficient. So certainly if a student has weak English language vocabulary, that is going to keep them from comprehending what they read and hear. But I've also met many students who have good English vocabulary and still struggle to comprehend. And visualizing and verbalizing will help develop both. One more thing I will say about that in terms of vocabulary is often I see when students are struggling with an English word, I see the teacher give the translation in what might be the primary language. Okay? This is actually causing students to have to translate what they hear before they can picture it. Instead of just giving them the translated word, go ahead and help them picture the word in English without necessarily giving them the translation of the word in the additional language.
Excellent. Our next question is, everything changed to online in 2020. How did that affect your ability to provide PD to schools?
Yeah, so there was a big shift, certainly in professional learning last year, and a number of people had to pivot. Thankfully, Lindamood-Bell, we had been providing all of our professional learning as an option online since 2015. So for us, both the live coaching, the level 3 live coaching, the PLCs, and those initial level 1 workshops. So we found that we were able to transition to online professional learning with ease since we'd already been doing it for so long. And we've seen that the student instruction could continue online as well, and with great success.
Excellent. Another question we have is it possible to utilize programs in other languages besides English?
Ooh, this is an excellent question. So important, that idea of process-based education. So in, for example, visualizing and verbalizing, you're going to learn a Socratic questioning technique that you can then use in any language. The technique that you use to develop comprehension in English could certainly be used in another language. Seeing Stars was written to develop the phoneme-grapheme connection in English, right? But again, that methodology and that Socratic questioning could be used to help students learn Spanish or French, etc.
Great. I think we have time for one more question. Would this replace my classroom ELA curriculum, or can it be used in addition to existing curriculum?
Excellent question. Thank you to whoever wrote that one in. So as we mentioned, it can certainly be used supplemental, right? That 15 minutes of core instruction daily, in addition to the curriculum your school is following. But similarly, the questioning and the Socratic method that you use can be incorporated into all curriculum. All right. Thank you, Erica, and thank you to all of you for sending those questions in. And thank you for joining us today. If you have any other questions, you can certainly feel free to give us a call, or you can contact me at brill.rollins@lindamood-bell.com. I'd be happy to set up a time to speak with your team about your students' needs and professional learning options that you can use to increase instructional capacity in your educators. In addition, certainly connect with us through our free toolkit. Erica just put it in the chat. This is free resources. There are videos, downloadable materials, and tips and on lessons and instruction and literacy. So they're a nice curated group of resources. Thank you so much for joining us. I hope the rest of your school year and the rest of 2021 is healthy and instructionally strong. Thank you.